Hello everybody and welcome to another boss ranking for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Also, welcome to my new microphone. Probably the most consistent positive feedback I've received over the years is that you all love my voice, so hopefully this new change is for the better. Let me know what y'all think. Back to the topic at hand, I gotta say, this may be the most difficult ranking I've ever completed for the channel. Sekiro has a fantastic set of bosses across the board, and there are none that I particularly hate. So choosing who ranks above who felt like sifting through mechanics with a fine-tooth comb looking for flubs in design where there were so few. Since I love nearly all of the bosses, I'd like to think of this list less as who is better than who and more which order would I put the bosses I want to fight the most if I could right now. Because of course this list is just my opinion anyway. We're definitely gonna do a community ranking on the quality here, so you'll all get the opportunity to weigh in. As for today, without further ado, here are my Sekiro Shadows Die Twice bosses ranked from worst to best. Number 17, Headless Ape and his wife. Okay, on a second playthrough, this fight was actually shocking. Between the first ape fight and the second, the only difference on my end was 2 more attack upgrades, one from the ape himself and the other from the owl. I guess that was enough to make the difference because when I came back here to get new footage for this video, I shattered his first health bar at a comical pace. Then his wife's son, mother brother pops down to help the feeble sap out. Really, I have no idea who it is. I'm too busy getting tag teamed by monkeys to read item descriptions at the moment. It's a bit of a clusterfuck, and that's largely what lands him at the bottom of the list. Even though I find this threesome to be more enjoyable than your average FromSoft Menage a Trois, I can't excuse the retreaded double helping of Phase 2 Guardian Ape with a heaping side of Phase 1 on top of it. Rather than create unique mechanics for them or an interesting arena to break aggro, they dumped them in a wide open cave and made them both dramatically weaker to compensate, especially the Phase 1 sidekick. If you use firecrackers and whack it a couple of times, that's about all it takes. No need for fancy strategies since your damage is king here. Still, there's a large enough room for error sheerly due to the fact that it's double the trouble. That means sprinting wildly around in an attempt to separate the two is a near must, and it can be a bit more annoying once you've adapted to the more aggressive playstyle that is meant to reward timely deflections in the face of danger. For the lazy retread and making me play more wait and bait than I would like to in Phase 2, this duo finds itself at the bottom of the list. Number 16, the Great Serpent. I got loads of comments on the difficulty ranking saying the Great Serpent isn't a boss, which is fair. I define bosses as things that drop memories, and this is the only thing on that list that doesn't. I left it up to a vote in the community difficulty ranking, and it currently stands at only 30% of people saying that it should not be included. Even with that notable opposition, the 70% wins out here, so here he is in all his glory. For its design, I love that there are multiple ways to approach this. If you're speedy, you can actually follow nice pathing that will allow you to avoid the snake almost entirely and get to the little hut in about 30 seconds. If you're super speedy, you can actually dive to the left and juke the snake and then jump left at the branch to hook up quickly and avoid the snake's attempts to gobble you. Really cool touch in the case you pull this off is if you don't stab the eye, it will still have it later when you find it near the gun fort. However, most players on the first time through aren't gonna full balls this. I know I didn't. The thing is terrifying, and getting spotted without a plan is certain death. The thing is, getting caught is rather hard if you follow the intuitive cues and make clever use of what you've learned so far. You've been taught to hide in tall grass, and you can do so until the snake turns right. That gives you a chance to hook down and run through the tunnel, then wait at the hug wall. You'll notice that the snake will move in towards your right, so slip on by and sneak through the crevice up to the grass. Play it safe and you'll be able to slowly move forward until the snake looks away and hugs across the wall, then you pass over the wall and the snake looks the other way, and you've got a clear path to victory. No matter how you approach it though, it's one of the more interesting and well-designed level hazard type fights that FromSoft has pulled off. Even so, it's difficult to make it more directly engaging than a proper combat encounter. Number 15, Corrupted Monk. Corrupted Monk is a tale of two battles. There are parts of this fight I like and there are parts that I don't. What I do like is how creative you can get with usages of items. I enjoy pairing her many different attacks, and I appreciate that she's a boss that practically requires you to lower vitality to effectively win since her posture bar is massive, which is a nice breather from the posture break races. That said, the amount of punishment this brute can take is daunting. When mixed in with how much damage she does to you and your posture, mostly killing you in 1 or 2 hits, the battle can feel overwhelming in the wrong kind of way. On the flip side, if you can work out a nice rhythm, you can take advantage of her weakness to snap seeds and firecrackers to make it so she never even touches you. Start by using Divine Confetti and Yasha Sugar, which is effectively Red Tier Stone Ring. Then 3 R1s, snap, 2, snap, 2, snap, 1, delay, deflect, then firecracker double R1 combo until she's dead. You can even use fistfuls of ash in place of firecrackers to do this strategy at lower levels of attack power. And now it's even possible to sneak behind the monk and get a stealth strike to insta-kill her with the proper manipulation. Most players probably won't bother with the second strategy, but all the first requires is good memory and a little rhythm. While I do love how many hidden strategies there are to uncover on bosses in these games, these make the monk so trivial that it's a bit more disappointment. But then when you don't use them, I think the monk's high damage output over a long drawn out battle can be tedious as much as fun. The positive side is that all the moves designed for her feel unique and refreshing thanks to its size, non-sword weapon, and attack cadence. Even if those aren't highlighted perfectly here, there's a better version later on to take care of that. So sadly as is, the monk is on the lesser end of bosses in Sekiro, mainly thanks to her inflexible duality as either a useless punching bag or an overpowered heavyweight boxing goddess. Number 14, Genichiro, Way of Tomoe. Genichiro's weakness is that outside of the Mortal Blade attacks in the opening, he is the same exact fight as before, and the only new addition actually leaves him more vulnerable. To an extent, I like this. He isn't his own boss as he is attached to Isshin the Sword Saint, so giving clever players a way to deal with him as quickly as possible is good design. But ultimately, it boils down to it just being another fight with Genichiro. While I love Genichiro and still enjoy the fight here, it can become a pain if you're stuck for a long time on the Sword Saint, which is likely considering his astronomical difficulty. I wish I had more to say about this boss, but that's it until we reach the better of his battles. It's just underwhelming to fight a boss that you've already fought before. Okay, I will give a little bit of credit, at least there is some lore significance here, but that's about it. Number 13, Lady Butterfly. Moonlight butter might not fly, but you know what butter is made of? Cheese. Okay, not exactly, but let me have this, okay? What I'm building a rickety bridge of correlations to is that it's almost impossible to fight the Lady Butterfly without one of two things happening: getting absolutely dominated or finding out how many different ways there are to manipulate her potato AI. I got through the entirety of the first phase in a recent fight only getting hit once. All my master plan consisted of was R1, step to the right, R1, step to the right ad nauseum. It was a joke. The second phase can be handled the same way if you manage to keep her aggro. Step back though and it's Gang City. I welcome second phases that bring on new mechanics, but adding a ton of minions? Not exactly what I had in mind. At least there are many ways to deal with them. You could use snap seeds, though they are quite valuable to be wasting here. You could hit them to thin the herd, or you could just Naruto run around like a fool until she snaps them into magic that is as easy to dodge as standing behind a pillar. The second phase adding auto butterfly magic is an intriguing development, but it's still far too easy to step counter behind for hits. I should also note that since she's optional and available at any time throughout the majority of the game, much like old Demon King in Dark Souls 3, you can come back here far later in your playthrough to further embarrass her. I kinda like that choose your difficulty methodology here though, because you're incentivized to kill her since she drops the valuable Sakura droplet and gives you +1 to your attack power. If you can kill her early, that will make the rest of the game just a little bit more manageable, but of course that's no easy feat. I guess in the end my problem with the butterfly is that her AI needs some work and that she is overshadowed by other fights that don't rely on cheap gang tactics to make their second phases engaging. It's a shame too, because I really enjoy the fight when you have to spend a ton of time deflecting, only step countering when it makes sense to, and shurikening her back to planet Earth whenever she decides to hang out on her wires. There's more than a solid foundation here, but her easy to manipulate AI and the lack of progressive creativity hold her back from a higher rank. Number 12, Folding Screen Monkeys. It feels like FromSoft is finally figuring out how to get a puzzle boss done right. Rather than forcing you into combat with the boss, it's more of a chase sequence with you needing to get crafty to match the monkey's speed. The only direct combat comes in with the terror chimps, which while terror is annoying, they're so easy to deal with it isn't much of a problem unless you get swarmed as a penalty for standing still for too long. Even then, just grapple away and you're good. The beginning cutscene is a brilliant way to give a subtle nudge as to each monkey's behavior based on their appearance on the folding screen. The purple monkey has great eyesight, so you'll need to blind it. The green monkey has great hearing, so you'll need to take advantage of that by making a loud noise. The orange monkey has poor eyesight and hearing, but if it does spot you, it'll alert all the other monkeys. And the final panel is more vague than the others, but it infers the invisibility of the final white monkey. The first problem I have though with these monkeys is that it can be a bit tedious to get them to follow the right pathing at times, especially in the case of the purple monkey and how hard it can be to get back in stealth against the orange one. Fortunately, that's what the bell is for, as it resets their position, making this complaint much less problematic. If you have trouble figuring things out, it's nice that they put an NPC around the arena to give extra hints, but honestly I think the memos hidden around in the folding screen at the beginning were enough. Even so, there's no harm in including it for those who don't want to lose their mind over a puzzle. Where the one major issue comes in is this fight being a bit of a chore on subsequent playthroughs. The sad thing about these experience over combat substance battles is that they lose some of their luster when you know what the experience is, and in this case, the solution to the puzzle. I thought I'd showcase a nice strategy to make that lack of shine a little less dull. In the beginning, the white monkey is sitting right behind you, so slash away. Then use Agachi Sugar and fly up to the orange one. You do have to be quick, but you can get the kill. Straight ahead, you can hook down and firecracker the green monkey to stun and kill him. Then up to the diagonal left, there are 2 hooks up to the purple monkey where you can chase him down. If you're quick, you can fall in 180 to firecracker in its face and end the fight like cake. Even with this being easy breezy, it can be pretty damn satisfying to pull off such a quick stylish kill after what was likely a long drawn out one on your first run. But even with that and my respect for its design on an initial playthrough, I don't think this fight has a staying power to compete with those higher on the list. Number 11, Shrew Corrupted Monk. For starters, the monk gets a lot of bonus points for being an integral part of the introductory portion of one of the most gorgeous areas FromSoft has ever created. Watching the cherry blossoms fall over the red bridge is stunning, and the fight isn't too far behind it. When it's at its best, that is. One of the monk's mechanics here is nearly pointless because it's so easy to avoid. It can spawn clones in a sort of phase in and out of space mechanic that reminds me of the hell realm of Wet Nurse, but you can circumvent that by running atop a tree and stealth striking one of its health bars. Even if you can't manage that, just swing around in the trees until it's over. Apparently, it's even possible to stealth strike both of the monk's first 2 health bars, and if you pull that off, the fight boils down to just a single health bar again. And at the level of posture and vitality you've likely amassed by this point, if you're being thorough, you might find that the true monk is even easier than the false version. This is because the final phases balance well, perhaps too well, in your favor. While she does unleash some brutal attacks I don't recall from the first fight, that fight likely prepared you well for her attack timings. Then the unblockable tear Centipede gives you great time to step counter for a chunk of vitality damage. Balancing that in with the deflections and stealth strikes makes this fight far easier than I realized it was in my first playthrough of the game. But all that said, difficulty isn't everything. The ambiance of the arena, the surprise of the monk being alive, well, and ready to kick your ass, the thrill of deflecting its elegant swings, the satisfaction of getting off that stealth strike to see its health bar melt, it's a ton of fun, and ultimately that's what matters most. So while it may be easier than I once thought, that doesn't make it a poor fight. It just can't quite stack up against some of the higher fights that offer balanced challenge and a lot of extra pizzazz. Number 10, hold on to your seats here, I'm gonna pronounce it again, Gyubu Masastaka Oniwa. I swear to God I'm trying my best. Considering we're counting the snake, this is the first true combat boss of the game. The war-torn battlefield arena is the perfect setting for it as well, and its ambiance is matched by Gyubu rushing in pridefully to assert you won't be passing the gate. It's a nice little mechanic too to give the player time to get free hits in before the start of the battle. Though there's no way I'm moving forward without mentioning his English dialogue.
My name is Gyubu Masataka Oniwa!
It's as if they asked this man to shout from the very bottom of his soul and he somehow managed to one-up that request. It may sound hilarious, but it matches the man putting his heart on the field in the name of the Ashina. In my first run of the game, Gyubu was a solid challenge to test me moving forward, but after having fought him quite a few times, there are things you can do to trivialize some of his more scary moves. First, grab an Akko Sugar near his boss arena for some extra damage. Second, getting firecrackers early is a huge help for this fight because you can balance between using them and stunning him for an almost perpetual stun lock. Finally, do your best to keep up with Gyubu and keep the greed in check. He attacks in varied patterns and has great range, but it's balanced well by using unlock strats and being able to strafe dodge many of his hits. For example, most of the time when you hook over to him, he'll do a swipe that you can dodge simply by smacking his horse's head and moving over. Knowledge of how the fight works somehow makes it even more engrossing though. When I'm turning the fight on him, it reduces his ability to run around freely and use some of his troublesome annoying combos, and going all out to rush him pumps the adrenaline nicely. What I don't like about Gyubu is how little differentiation there is between phase 1 and 2. Not that every boss needs a phase 2, but with the multiple bar mechanic, it's like you practically expect there to be one. He does seem to get a bit more aggressive after the first health bar, so at least there's that. I also think he's susceptible to some of the more egregious shitboxes for bosses in this game. Many of his attacks have a tendency to swing through the ground and hit you from behind, even if you deflect. And his deflect timings can sometimes feel really awkward with how big his reach is and how fast his spear can move. But it's certainly a fantastic duel from the moment he charges the battlefield loudly to his fall at the hands of Sekiro as he breathes out a final regret that he couldn't better serve Genichiro. Number 9, Emma the Gentle Blade. Like Genichiro, Way of Tomoe, Emma is a boss attached to Isshin. As a result, I feel like her design is intended to be limited as to not impose much overall difficulty on the player in terms of the overall endurance for the upcoming fight. There is a key difference though. You've never fought Emma before, so learning to battle her is a whole different beast. I think I died to Emma more than I ever did to all 3 battles with Genichiro combined. This is because Emma's timings can be very delayed, difficult to get a read on at times, and she has so many different attacks that you can end end up falling into the trap of recklessly attacking and then getting countered. She has all 3 unblockables as well. Her thrust can come from a long windup after a deflect for an easy Mikiri counter, but she also is likely to do a lunging thrust from across the arena if you try to run away and heal. It's a great but terrifying mechanic that forces you to square up and only heal when you know you have the upper hand for a moment. She also has a sweep that comes suddenly out mid-combo and requires very fast reaction times. And that grab, man. It has deceptive reach and tracking, and the slam destroys your health. Mix that in with her entire arsenal tuned to offbeat rhythms and she can be a doozy. And I adore every second of it. The challenge is perfectly set for a boss that precedes another. It's badass to see Emma show off her sword skills. The moment before the battle feels like the calm before the storm, and it sets the right tone for going for the evil ending. Because, well, killing Emma is a savage crime. The only real downside other than having to kill Emma is the fight is so short when you do win. I really do wish she was her own separate entity so it could have been more fleshed out. Also, it can be pretty easy to turn the Ashina arts back on her with the Ichimonji double. Basically, just deflect any downward swing and immediately Ichimonji double. It'll hit her almost every time before she can do anything in stack posture rapidly with little to no risk. The only thing to watch out for is her overhead swing. That's often followed by a double slash that is too fast for Ichimonji. Even so, I hold a fond spot for Emma. It's a beautiful and tragic battle. I just wish there was a little bit more substance to it. Number 8, Guardian Ape. The divergence in quality of the Guardian Ape's phases made this a toss-up for me. Phase 1 in many ways is an extremely frustrating fight with a massive foe that is dangerously fast for its size, has huge hitboxes as a result, and becomes a fight of endurance and patience thanks to small attack windows. Deflecting it can be done, but building posture on it takes such a damn long time that you'll likely finish it by ending its vitality anyway. I do enjoy how many different combos and attacks it has because I love variety. I'm just not sure I enjoy the tiny windows of opportunity you get compared to how fast and frequent the ape is dealing devastating damage. There is of course a nice cycle you can do with the ape. The boss is programmed to fall back after landing too many hits in a short period of time during its stun, but you can use this to your advantage. Open the fight with a firecracker and 2 mortal blades to stun him. As his head falls back, whack him twice. Once he's fully risen, hit him 5 times while moving forward to make sure you don't miss, pause, and then hit his head twice on the way down. Rinse and repeat to get an easy no-hit first phase. It manipulates his AI, sure, but he threw shit at me and farted on my hopes and dreams, so we'll call it even. There are things I like about the first phase, such as the variety it brings to the table over the many humanoid sword-based enemies in the game, but the high level of aggression, huge hitboxes, heavy damage for the mid-game, and minuscule attack opportunities for you can lead to too much frustration. As for the second phase, initially I didn't like it. Not because I think it's bad, but because I suck so bad at it. I couldn't deflect his sporadic sword strikes and I didn't want to deal with that scream, so I baited his belly flop and punished it to win in a fight that took over 10 minutes of wait and bait. But once I did play some more here, I started to get better at the deflections, and as I got better, I started to enjoy the pacing of it more and more. You are rewarded big time for being able to deflect too. You might get a 5-hit flurry that allows you to go behind and smack a fart-free ass, or you get a mega slam of his sword. If you deflect the mega slam or the final hit of the flurry, he'll fall to the ground, allowing you to get multiple free strikes in. It's such a great reward for your skill in deflections, and I absolutely love that piece of design. To keep you on your toes outside of the inconsistent attack patterns, he has a few unblockable sweeps, some combos that change patterns on the fly, and of course, the scream. I really don't enjoy the scream since it forces you to move away, but if you want to be really ballsy, you can use a pacifying agent and divine confetti to slice your way through it. This can lead the charge of a full ball strat that pushes through the screams and baits melee swings to knock him down, and it's a ton of fun to try out. A final cool mechanic is that when he's knocked down, you can use the pull effect on the spear to pull out the parasite for huge posture damage and a staggered window for more attacks. His second phase has so much to unpack, and even though the scream can be an irritant that breaks up the flow of an otherwise very intense fight, there's so much to love here. When looking at the fight as a whole though, it's an above average beginning with an excellent finish. That first piece is enough to hold it back from greater heights, but I really can't emphasize enough how much I enjoy the second phase when it's firing on all cylinders. Number 7, Isshin Ashina. Deciding which flavor of Isshin edges out the other was no easy task, at least at first glance. Upon deeper thought, it's hard to give the fire variant the edge due to an entire extra phase in the Sword Saints battle. That's not to say that the 2 phases here aren't excellent. The first phase feels like a battle with a classic samurai. He uses the Ashina arts like a true master, but interestingly enough, I would actually say his attacks are easier to read than Emma's. They have a slower, more deliberate pace to them, but in some ways they can slip you up just as much, especially having just fought her. For For example, it's very easy to get in a loop of doing 2 attacks then deflecting 2 of his, but eventually he'll do a stun which is more delayed on the deflect timing. Because of his devastating posture damage, you'll likely have yours broken and be unable to counter. It's great design that forces you to be reactionary and baits you by lulling you into a rhythm. The big advantage for you is his frequent usage of the Ichimonji double. It's a very easy attack to step counter and allows you to quickly damage his vitality so his posture meter stays high. The second phase is a whole different animal though. Unless you are a deflect god, you need to firecracker his Judgment Cut Firestorm or you're going to get ravaged. His 2 other primary fire moves can actually work similarly to your advantage as the Ichimonji double if you rotate behind him to your right for a punish. But then he baits you again by doing a quick slash and fire spam that has hyper armor. It's by far his most dangerous move outside of the Mega Fire Slice-O-Rama. Where he loses a little bit of ground to his lightning counterpart other than the lack of a third phase is that while reading his moves can be tricky, once you get the trick down to it, it can make him a little bit easy, squandering some of the challenge. Still, it allows his fight to feel adeptly balanced between attacks that can obliterate you if not deflected and many windows of opportunity if you do know how to execute. Standing against him feeds into your corruption after taking down Emma, and it leads to an ending that makes me feel like a total piece of shit. Good times. Number 6, Great Shinobi Owl. Of the 3 possible fights atop the tower here at the mid-game, the Owl plays by far the most dirty. Emma is a graceful swordswoman, Isshin uses an imposing technique and fire as a last resort, and Owl comes out swinging with anti-healing orbs, poison, shurikens, smoke, firecrackers, the whole 9 yards. He doesn't give a shit who you are. Emma, Sekiro, Isshin, he's taking you all down, and he's pretty good at it too. The Owl has timings on his attacks unlike any other swordsman in the game, with the closest perhaps being Guardian Ape. His weapon is Gargantuan, which makes you think it would be easier to follow, but in reality it plays tricks on my eyes and makes me deflect earlier than I should. That adds a satisfying layer of challenge. On top of that, the setting is top notch. A battle atop the tower with your father when he's asked you to forsake your master and you say, nah, the shinobi code is defined by the shinobi. You've chosen your path and I've chosen mine. Let's duke it out. Adds so much tension, but at the same time excitement and almost even a playfulness to the fight. Throughout, the Owl acts as if you're sparring when it's clear his intent is to kill you. He can't help but have pride in the wolf he's raised even until his dying breath. All the various combos he can employ, the shinobi tools he uses in between them to throw you off, every bit of it makes this a deviously difficult battle for the mid to late game that challenges you once again to get good. It's awesome. Overcoming everything the Owl has, or at least you would think that's the case, gives you a massive amount of pride once you defeat him, and perhaps even a little bit of sorrow for putting him down. I also enjoy that he is so different from the other swordsmen in the game. He feels wholly unique, which is very welcome. The only downside of the fight is the arena. With his closing speed and size, it can be frustrating to be stuffed into such a small space. Getting pinned against the wall in Sekiro leads to an awful camera angle that can tip the odds harshly against you. Still, that's not enough to knock the Owl out of the higher ranks, making him well deserving of a spot just outside the top 5. Number 5, Divine Dragon. If FromSoft has ever done a fight that is more spectacle than substance right, this is it. I can most easily compare it to Yorm in Dark Souls 3. While I think Yorm gets a bit of a bad rap, I think it's hard to argue against the idea that the battle is bogged down to finding a few seconds to charge a sword and unleash its power for the win. Of course, Yorm isn't gonna let you do this. He keeps constant pressure on you, especially in the second phase. So you have to use clever positioning and adept timing to be able to get in the hits you need, few as they may be. The second phase of Divine Dragon is much of the same. You need to land lightning strikes on the body of the dragon by catching and throwing it from atop the set of 5 trees with it spawning at random. However, doing this requires you to dodge the dragon's air slashes that come from many different angles. They are telegraphed depending on how it swings a sword, but matching your movement to dodge or deflect it while trying to swing between the trees to get the lightning does require you to have thought behind your timing. And like Yorm, when the dragon hits, it really hurts. Direct damage isn't your only deterrent either. You're pressured by the clock here because the dragon will push you away after a bit and force you to dodge slashes to make your way to your source of damage. But let's be real, while the fight is mechanically sound, what really pushes it to these heights on the list is how electrifying it is. Swinging through the air with a majestic dragon lining the backdrop, charging your body with lightning to throw its energy like a spear to pierce it, the otherworldly setting, the music that's perhaps the finest in the game, frankly, it's one of the most breathtaking gaming moments in recent memory. And beyond the connection to Yorm's design, Divine Dragon takes a step forward in providing challenge by forcing a modestly difficult dodge test upon you to earn the right to the final blow. I say modest, but the final portion where it's swinging every second feels like a dance that is quite challenging to do without taking damage. Though you'll likely be fine to revive at that point anyway because the first part of the fight is piss easy. You get a bunch of decaying monsters coming out of the ground and they are handled with ridiculous ease. Slaying them by sword is child's play as it is, but if you swing up to one of the trees and do an air death strike, you can slaughter more than half of them in a single swing. Still, even that is pretty damn amusing. The fight had me grinning ear to ear every step of the way, and I believe that with its difficult dodge sequence toward the end and force Wind to push you back will have more staying power for subsequent playthroughs than Yorm has. But really, I shouldn't continue comparing Divine Dragon to anything else. It's very much its own unique and enchanting boss fight that is well deserving of a spot in the top 5. Number 4, Genichiro Ashina. What an asshole bringing a bow to a sword fight. Then again, I'm bringing firecrackers. Before we even get to the fight itself, taking into account that he chopped our arm off in the tutorial, I was surprised we were ready for a rematch so soon. I can respect his ambitions of wanting the power of the Immortal Blood, but goddamn, when that kid says I'm a shinobi, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm a shinobi! But the fight can be deceptively tough. This is thanks to Genichiro's penchant for backing up and using the bow. It's a wonderfully devious mechanic that correctly punishes players for mashing R1. As long as you meter your hits one by one, you'll always be ready to deflect when the time comes by reading his rhythm, and if he does backstep to do that terrible jumping arrow spam, you'll be ready to move forward and slice him before it ever rains upon you. The bow does a great job at keeping you in check and adds variation to the fight, but it can still be mildly irritating in fights where he doesn't stop spamming it. Genichiro will gain his posture back quickly until you've knocked his vitality down a bit, so persistence in attacking and deflecting here is key. This leads to quite an intense battle since he has so many different variations on his combos. For example, in the first phase, if he does a jumping attack, he will always follow with an unblockable thrust if you deflect, which means easy Mikiri for you. However, in the second phase, he starts leaning toward a sweep, meaning it's time for the Goomba. But every now and again, he'll mix the thrust back in, baiting you to jump and getting in a nice stab for himself. It's another piece that forces you to be reactionary and not just learn the boss moves like they're a script set in stone. That's what pushes Genichiro up as a boss and Sekiro bosses in general. You can't just assume that their pattern is set in stone. What they could do could change at any given time, even if there is a certain rhythm and repetition to what they do. This makes each encounter unique. Genichiro's most lethal sword move, his Wombo combo, can be a great time to stack his posture if you're a deflect god, but a nice tip is that you can just firecracker after deflecting the 2 startup hits to knock him out of it. The first 2 phases are a wonderful sword duel with an adept samurai willing to pull out any trick he can to make sure you stay dead. And that thirst for your demise has him reveal his lightning arts of Tomoe, leading to the final phase, which is ridiculously easy for 2 reasons. 1, he gives you time to heal in the beginning and then always opens with a hugely telegraphed thrust. Easy Mikiri, which I should mention, leveling better Mikiri counters before this fight is a huge help since he uses thrust quite often. Beyond that, far and away what makes it cake is a lightning reversal. In my first playthrough, I didn't really get what I was supposed to do for these. I thought I had to deflect in midair, but it's far easier than that. Just delay for a bit during his long wind up, and while standing still, jump in the air and press R1 after you get shocked. It'll do a sliver of damage to you, but it will devastate Genichiro's health and posture in return. Not only that, but the shock will stun him, allowing you to get in more damage. He does add in some unexpected twists to his attacks from phase 1 that could throw you for a loop, and if you do miss the timing on the lightning return, it really does hurt, but the third phase is over far too quick in comparison to the first 2. It makes decent sense thematically though, with him having to bail out to find more power to claim the Divine Era at a later time and finally end Sekiro for good. Plus, lightning reversals feel amazing to pull off, so it's easy to let your excitement overcome the difficulty drop. Overall, Genichiro is an excellent fight that forces your aggression, makes you adapt to the deflection system whether you like it or not, has so many different attacks with multiple twists on each to keep you reactionary, and he has a cool final phase that may be easy but still manages to be a blast as you massacre his health. Number 3, Demon of Hatred. On a list that was hard to sort, this was easily the hardest boss to place. On one hand, I want to tell it to go fuck itself thanks to its iffy hitboxes, insane levels of damage for the endgame, which is problematic considering it's one of the longest fights in the game, and the amount of different combos with quick tells it pulls out, punishing greed hard, compounding all of the above. On the other hand, it's far and away one of the most unique bosses in the game. It feels ripped straight out of Bloodborne, which we all know I have an undying love for, and I can't point to any of its attacks actually being bullshit. They just require more precision to handle than normal due to the size of the behemoth. Ultimately, how much I enjoy this fight, and probably you as well, will boil down to how much you're able to get good against it. There are of course a couple of ways to help, the most notable of which is the Malcontent upgrade for the whistle prosthetic. If used sparingly, this thing will stun him for longer than one of his staggers, giving you a dramatically larger margin for error since you get a lot of free hits. Between those, the staggers, and the belly flop, which is an easy read and counter, you get a lot of opportunities for damage. What you need to watch out for is the stomp, the charge, and the close-up Wombo combo. Those can quickly rip you to shreds. You can also get roasted by the fireballs and firewalls if you aren't careful. But when it comes down to it, thinking about what I love and hate here, it really boils down to how much fun I have fighting the Demon of Hatred as to where to rank it. Because despite my complaints about oversized hitboxes and high damage output for a lengthy battle, the first can be dealt with by understanding your dodge radius, and the latter can be handled by being more conservative. It adds a dynamic that retires the methodology of aggression and deflect that is actually a breath of fresh air for the game. For that reason, I do think the Demon of Hatred is an excellent boss, and I do have plenty of fun fighting it as well. Just not as much as a few of our final contenders. Number 2, Al Father. Take the Father fight from the rooftops of Ashina, remove the smoke, poison, and anti-health orbs, and add speed that results in an onslaught similar to the most aggressive enemies in the game, and you've got Al Father. What I love about this fight is it takes what you've learned from the first encounter and uses it in 2 ways. First, it allows you to have a leg up in this fight since you know some of what to expect. At the same time, it subverts much of his previous attacks, adding new deviations and new moves altogether that throw you off enough to be forced to learn how to handle him all over again. He still has the same weakness of leaving his back exposed as the previous Al, but they're much more challenging to reach here. For your benefit, you've got a lot more game to play to rack up those prayer beads and attack power upgrades to make this fight more feasible. It's a worthwhile pursuit because even when you've gotten a bunch of prayer beads, the Al can still string together a combo that will drain it to 0 in the blink of an eye. In the second phase, it becomes even harder to take advantage of his windows because he'll disappear frequently, but you can use this phase back into your advantage for a quick strike. That and the guaranteed opportunity to Makiri counter when he throws out his Al will help out a lot. The only thing I feel holds back this fight ever so slightly is that a lot of how you pull off your damage feels almost scripted. Get behind the 2 shuriken slam, get behind the firecracker attack, Makiri the big thrust, and avoid just about everything else. Sadly, building posture on the Al takes a very long time without doing vitality damage, so that is the route to victory. Even so, it makes sense to have bosses in the game that aren't outright deflect to win, so he gets points in my book for that variety. I also have to say that it's a bit of a pain to reach him. Without a guide, I probably never would have even figured it out, but that's a pretty minor gripe. I still love the setting of facing off against your father, and it's endearing to the father-son bond that his parting words are that being beaten by the son he trained all those years to be a master shinobi is a sweet way to go. The only thing sweeter on today's list is the best boss in Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Number 1, Isshin the Sword Saint. In follow-up to the light warm-up of Genichiro Way of Tomoe, the Sword Saint is here to prove the final boss isn't gonna be some pushover. You prove your point, old man, and you prove it well. The first phase really isn't that bad. In fact, it's a lighter version of the phase in the Shura ending. Most notably, he is missing his bait attack where he slides under your first R1 swing and counters fast enough that if you spam R1, you'll get hit. I like that attack because it keeps you in check and forces you to be reactionary, but that's a point for Fire Isshin. Another thing working toward your advantage here over Fire Isshin though is it being in the endgame. I made a point in my playthrough to collect the necessary components to make the Dragon Mask, which let me put every 5 levels of skill points into more attack power. It didn't take me long to have more than enough skills that I like, so I started dumping things into attack power and ended my second playthrough with 15 attack power. The first phase is no problem after having gotten used to Fire Isshin, but it's always enjoyable nonetheless. The second phase is where things get wild. Interestingly enough, you can actually keep him aggroed to you long enough that you can skip phase 2 entirely, but it requires certain movements and perfect deflections to keep his interest. Doing it casually, I got close out of one of my 3 fights with him, but he still managed to pull out the spear in the end. The downside is that he loses a huge chunk of posture if he does whip it out. The upside is the startup gives you time to buff, which you should because this phase is relentless. It's not just speed. A big part of what makes phase 2 so insane is the hyper armor. Isshin is able to push through so many of your attacks, so you have to be absolutely 100% reactionary here, which is really hard to do when he has so many different moves that he can pull out at any given moment, with many of them requiring some of the fastest reaction times in the game. When they don't, they're often delayed in a weird pattern that makes it hard to follow. Add in that he can stack posture more quickly than most in the game, and you're in for a world of hurt. That said, like FromSoft's punishing challenges at their finest, it never feels unfair. It feels like raw, brutal challenge. Every single attack he pulls out has a viable counter, you just have to overcome everything he dishes out, which is all the more rewarding when you consider this non-scripted duel. Even after a second playthrough, I am still pretty terrible at reading the second phase though, but with your endgame resources like full gourd, plenty of vitality, and your preferred shinobi tools, it's certainly doable, which keeps the balance in check. Phase 3 is more of the same, but with the added lightning attacks. Much like Genichiro, while these attacks are cool, they do kinda undermine the fight. If you can use these counters, you can massacre Isshin's health. Then again, I kinda like this mechanic as a reward because the second phase is so rough. It's like a gift to you for making it through to the last bit of the showdown, and it's not as if you don't still have to deal with those other attacks and have the correct timing for the redirect. As a final battle, it's imposing to see a restored Isshin come out of his grandson, and it feels much more honorable than the Shura counterpart because he is fighting to fulfill his grandson's wish and not stop you from becoming a demon. The ending is much more satisfying as well because instead of cutting him down completely, he surrenders honorably. All in all, this boss encapsulates perfectly what I've come to love about Sekiro's bosses. Genichiro is the right amount of difficult going into such a tough boss. Phase 1 of Isshin is exactly the warm-up you need. The difficulty dial gets quickly turned up to 11 and tests all the deflection, rhythm, and shinobi skills you've gained over the course of the game. And the story context behind battling Isshin one-on-one is legendary. The final piece with you tossing lightning back and forth to the conclusion with you ending Isshin's restored life and honor is a nearly flawless send-off to this phenomenal experience. But as always, that's just my opinion. opinion. Which bosses in Sekiro were your favorites and least favorites? Let us know in the comments below. Hopefully the wait for this video is worth it between doing a second playthrough for new footage and setting up my workstation and new microphone for editing videos, which there will be plenty more of on Sekiro and other games like Kingdom Hearts and Legend of Zelda, so why not subscribe? And if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like. It means a lot to me to know you're enjoying the content. I want to thank you all for watching today. Much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.